Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be the 5-position tier list for patch 7.35D. But before we get into the video, I just want to let you guys know that I'm doing replay reviews on stream every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Twitch, which is linked down below in the description. If you're a newer player or a player basically below 4K MMR and you want me to review one of your replays and give you advice, you can go to my Patreon down below in the description and sign up, or you can just go to my Twitch and subscribe there. Every supporter can request at least one replay every month, and I'll also be playing games with the community on those streams as well. So I hope to see you guys there, and with that out of the way, let's get back to the video. So there's no real reason to delay any longer because you guys get it at this point. We're not getting another patch for 40,000 years, so this is the meta. So let's just jump into the S tier here, and the first hero we have is Crystal Maiden. Actually, I was a little bit surprised when I went to make this list because I don't actually see a lot of Crystal Maiden in high divine, low immortal games. Like, they're just not really, it's not a popular hero because I think people just opt for more than what this hero gives, because this hero is really, really good in the lane. That's like one of the strengths of the hero. Like, it's very good at slowing and, stunning people and just, providing insane utility then. And then even later in the game, if you can get some items, you can get your ult and you can kind of cast it in the middle of a fight and there's not a ton of stuns. You can also be extremely effective in that way as well because you get a lot tankier when you cast your ult these days, and that can be really, really good. But the problem with the hero is if you have to buy a lot of like glimmer and force and any kind of survivability that you can possibly get, because it's just such a squishy hero that if you ever get on top, if like any of the enemy heroes get on top of you, they jump you, you are just going to die unless you have those defensive items, and that's just always going to be a problem. So a lot of people are opting for other supports that just are allowed to buy or able to buy, Solar Crest or these other kinds of things that are more utility, obviously, but defensive in nature, but also have some offensive component or some team fight component or something like that as well, where Crystal Maiden's kind of all in with just hoping that she doesn't get jumped and die, and if it's a good game where she can be a little bit elusive or she can go in with her ult, then it's really, really good. And I mean, it was picked a ton in the Elite League, it's picked a decent amount here in ESL, but it's kind of doesn't have a great win rate, but it's also picked like top 3 in supports in the 5 position in high immortal pubs. So, and I put it here for that reason. I mean, like I said, personally, it's one of those where it is just a classic support. It is pretty good right now. The mana and regen, because everyone's farming so much, also is a benefit to your team. So there are good things about it, and it is kind of a stable support that I would definitely recommend picking if you don't know who to pick from the 5 position, because like I said, you can have such a good lane, you can secure that kind of most important part for the 5 position. But like I said, it is risk reward in that way because you are so squishy. So that's Crystal Maiden. And then on to the next like traditional support that people generally play would be Disruptor. And the good thing about this hero is because every single other role, it seems 1 through 4, just they're all about farming, getting items, like basically carrying the game with damage one way or the other. 5 position is still going to be and has kind of become the role where you're just always going to pick a hero that can do a lot with very little, and that is Disruptor. This hero doesn't really need very much. His skills are just so good by themselves. Now, that's obviously not always true in the sense of like you don't just want to get no items. Like, you want to have some items because defensive items are always beneficial, and if you do get an Ags later in the game, you are extremely, extremely powerful. But really, this hero is just all about getting some levels, and that's all you really need, and then your team fight is crazy. You're also really good for chasing people down with your glimpse, or messing up people's teleports. If you are getting aggressive in the lane, they try to teleport back, you glimpse them back to base. There's all those little cheeky things and annoying things you can do that make this hero pretty good, but it's really all about the team fight and doing a lot with very little, because that is what supports are about, or 5 positions are about these days. And so Disruptor's, again, a top pick, pretty good win rate, so that's why he, especially for pubs, so that's why he's up here in the S tier. And then kind of a unique hero that's getting picked a decent amount in pubs and in pros is actually Bane. And this hero kind of was underrated, I feel like, for a long time because people just didn't realize how good Enfeeble was. But Enfeeble's kind of this ridiculous spell that just, like, if you look at it, attack damage reduction on level 1 is 55%. You can literally go 1 point in this ability and you just place it on the enemy core and they can't last it anymore. It's kind of ridiculous. So obviously the build just, it depends what lane you're going to have, the matchups and stuff, because you might want Brain Sap, or like you might want Nightmare to set up a stun if you have a Mirana or something like that. Like you can do different things in the lane in the early game. You can max different spells, but this hero just has a lot more utility than people kind of realized, I think. So it was on the upswing for a while, and now it finally has gotten to the point where like, oh yeah, this hero is absolutely insane. And then the ult is always going to be good. Like it's always that single target pick off, but it's like a mini Doom in a way, as long as you can channel it. And then if you are able to get to that point where you get an Ags or something else like that, you can kind of become insane in that way. So the Ags and the Shard, all those things are pretty good. Obviously, you're very survivable. You're good at trading. It's just an all around decent hero right now. Pretty stable, but also a little bit odd because it's not like your traditional Lion or anything like that that has a, fairly reliable stun. It can be a little bit awkward, but you can also feel like, oh, there's a Bane on the enemy team. We have to be extremely careful. It's super annoying to deal with and hard to deal with in lane. So that's kind of what I think this hero is all about in that way. And it honestly can get, because being a universal hero and getting some stats and stuff, it can get pretty tanky later on too, which is a little bit surprising. Something 5 positions usually don't do. That is something that you can do with Bane. And then you do have options, because sometimes you can buy like defensive items, you can buy Force Staff, Glimmer, all those kinds of things, but you can also buy more offensive items if you don't really necessarily need to be defensive in that game for whatever reason. And then lastly, for S tier heroes, we have Io. And this is one of those heroes that's a little bit weird because it is a top tier pick right now, like in Immortal Pubs and with the pick rate and the win rate and all that kind of stuff. It is an S tier hero. But you'll notice with my tier list, I pretty much put those kind of cheese or unique specialist heroes all the way to the right of my list. And that's usually because they're kind of not afterthoughts, but they're usually not picked as much. And it's very much like if you know how to play the hero, if you're in the right MMR, all those kinds of things, maybe you're in a party, this would be good to pick. But otherwise, it's a little bit weird and awkward for pubs. And that is Io. Now, it's not like, I would say, a Chen, where Chen, when it's good, is just one of these heroes that doesn't work in pubs, I feel like, unless you're at high MMR, because your team is not going to take advantage of that hero and its strengths. Io is not really like that, because Chen is all about that early timing, that push, getting those creeps and stuff like that. And like I said, your teammates aren't really going to coordinate with you. But Io is a little bit different, where if you are able to just kind of stick with one hero, one guy on your team, and just amp him up and make him insanely strong and survivable, that can work in a lot of games. But you just have to make sure that you know what matchup, that you're going to have and who to stick with and when to do that and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, in pubs, for all these supports, you're going to be picking first, so it's a little bit awkward, but it really doesn't feel good when your 5 position has no stun, no control, no team fight. Like, that's the other reason it can be awkward. So hopefully your teammates pick accordingly, and that's going to happen less and less the lower MMR you get. So you might pick an IO5 and then, no one else picks a stun. It just feels like, oh great, we're not going to do anything this game. But if it's the right lineup, like I said, and you can pair with like a Luna or something else that, benefits from the attack speed and the tank ability and all that kind of stuff, it can be really, really good. But the other thing is, you often want like more than one hero that you can link to, because for the most part, for the first 20 minutes of the game or so, obviously outside of the lane, you're not really going to want to follow your carry around. So you'd like to be able to follow your mid or your offlaner around or something like that to actually be effective until your carry has, 2-3 items or whatever and is ready to push and fight. So those are the main things that I would say you should consider when picking Io, because like I said, it is a specialist hero. You have to know all that kind of stuff. You have to kind of have a game sense. Because even though the hero seems brain dead, like, oh, just click tether on somebody and, run around, it's really not that simple, because you're going to have to coordinate the ultimate and all that kind of stuff, and you need to really know what you're doing and, have map awareness and stuff like that. So that's Io, that's the S tier, and these are all just, pretty standard, pretty classic, pretty good supports. I mean, there's nothing crazy special about the 5 position other than they can do a lot with very little items and stuff like that, like I said, with Disruptor. And A tier continues that trend with Oracle. This hero is not as popular, I think, in pros, but it is very good in pubs right now, has a very good win rate, and this hero can just kind of be insane, especially in some matchups. Again, it's a little bit awkward. Maybe I would even edit this one and put it all the way over here with the Chens and the Enchantresses and stuff like that, because this hero can be one where it's like, okay, I didn't really pick, yes, you have a root, but I didn't really pick a stun for my 5. It's a little bit awkward. You do a lot of damage in some ways, but then you also save and heal. So it is a specialist hero. You have to know how to play it, but in the right matchups, in the right games, this hero can literally win you the entire game, because if you just press alt on somebody, the correct person, whoever the enemy is committing on, you literally can save the game sometimes, and that's all the enemy has. Like, that's all their initiation. That's really what they're counting on or whatever, and then you just win the game from there. Or maybe there's a Zeus on the enemy team, and this hero just absolutely destroys that because, Zeus is focusing down a guy, but you can just, put your one ability on him. He takes no magic damage. So there are just really, really good matchups, and that's why this hero's pretty good right now. And I might as well talk about the specialist heroes anyway, because, I'm already there. We're already kind of moving towards the end here. So I'll just mention Chen. Chen was kind of like Giga Broken insane in the recent patch, a couple patches ago. He's still pretty good, just not as insane and broken. I would still kind of always put him in the don't pick this hero even if he's good. If he's bad, definitely don't pick him, but he's definitely playable, but probably I wouldn't pick him unless you're above like 5k. Now, if you like him, you can have fun with him, of course. He is decent, but yeah, that's just kind of my general rule with Chen, I would say. And then Enchantress is probably one of the most popular, if not the most popular support, or rising up to like S tier support right now in pros. I think in the ESL games, it's probably like the top picked support or whatever. It's just not really there in pubs yet. It's also one of those weird specialist heroes where, again, awkward, you don't have a stun. You're also playing kind of right click from the 5 position, which is a little bit awkward, but the 5 position really is the position this hero plays because it's ranged and all that kind of stuff. It is tanky, but it's not tanky in your traditional sense. It's like really not tanky at all to magic damage, more to right clicks. So it just has this weird awkward, you need to know how far you can push your limits in certain games and stuff like that, and where you need to position yourself. It's all about that and dishing out a ton of damage. So these are all kind of those specialist heroes. And then going back to the beginning of the list now, we have Shadow Shaman, just kind of like a very good stunner, and then you have that push, obviously, and that amped up hex damage that I talked about, I think, in the 4 position video. Very good right now. Just better as a 5, I think, because yes, you are good with a blink and some other items, but you don't necessarily need those if you have some other initiation and stuff on your team. Like, it's good enough just to have your hex, your push if you can take a tower or something like that. You can even split push with this hero, which is very good and independent, which is also, I think, better for lower MMR pubs too, because if you're in a situation where you're losing, your team's annoying, they're not coordinating, you can always kind of do solo games as well. Then Veno, pretty good 5 right now. It's great because you don't have to reliably get any farm. As a 4, it just feels a little bit awkward. As an offlane, it feels extremely awkward sometimes because, you have a Veno core. That's weird. But as a 5, you don't need to do anything. You literally just need to win the lane, which is pretty easy as a Veno. Like, you have one of the best early game spells in Gale, and you harass the enemy out of the lane. And then later on, you literally just like ult people and kind of like annoy people with your wards. And that's all you really need to do. And it is very, very effective. And so that's honestly Venomancer in a nutshell. And then Treant's just been good for a long, long time. Like, I know that he was like S tier, like probably a few patches ago. I think the last time I did a tier list, I still had him in S tier, even though he wasn't really picked as much in the pro league, and he was kind of like, he had fallen off, but I think he fell off like too much. Like, he got nerfed a little bit, and then people just stopped like picking him at all. But then kind of, I think the pros realized like, oh wait, we're ignoring this hero. He's actually still pretty good. He's still a lane dominator, even if he's not as good as he once was. So same thing, lane dominator, good at healing towers, obviously makes your high ground even better, and then that ultimate is always going to be good late game as well. But this hero's super annoying and just crushes lanes. And then Shadow Demon is a decent support right now because of the things it provides with like Luna's being popular and stuff like that, and also with the Purge and the ultimate just being really good against a lot of heroes. I think that's honestly one of the main things that it does right now. It's just these it's kind of a specialist hero though, because it doesn't get picked a lot in pubs. Like, I feel like it's very rare below like 5k or even 4k maybe, I don't know, that you see a Shadow Demon. Like, who really plays this hero? So I feel like a lot of people like don't even know what it does, but it is really good right now. The pros are picking it a ton, and it really has to do with matchups, I think. Like, this hero is all about the matchups. If the ultimate and stuff like that counters a lot of heroes, there's a lot of good illusion heroes to spawn, you need a lot of saves or whatever, there's a lot of things you need to save from, that just makes this hero really good, and I think it's the perfect meta for that kind of hero right now. And then Pugna's still pretty good as a 5. Just based on the win rates, pick rates, it's just okay, median, kind of a little bit better than middle of the road. People are, I think, maybe underestimating it some because it's just been so annoying, so popular for a long time, but its win rates are pretty good and its pick rates are pretty good, like I said. So I think it's just up there in the A tier. If anything, it's kind of falling off, but it's still pretty good. It's been popular for a very, very long time. And then Vengeful Spirit, I think this is like a great place for her as a 5 position because she can do a lot with very little, and she can just buy a Solar Crest, and that's all she really needs. And then later in the game, if you can really get good items, obviously you can get your Ags, and then it just feels really hard for the enemy to deal with anything because it's almost like a Disruptor in that way, where once the Disruptor gets Ags, it feels like the entire game is just like out of hand. And that's the same thing with Venge. If you have a 5 Venge with an Ags, it just feels like, what are we really going to do? Like the enemy just has no solutions for that because now they have all these other heroes to deal with, and there's this Venge that's a 5 that should be the easy hero to kill and is super tanky now, and then like also has 2 lives, very, very annoying to deal with, plus that double stun, the save, all that kind of stuff. And I think especially since the save has become more of a shield instead of like damage reduction like it was before, I think that just makes it even better because people can like blink out and all that stuff, or you can blink out. It just makes it more dynamic in that way. So that's A tier. Then we have B tier, and we have Nature's Prophet here. Again, I'm not a fan of Nature's Prophet support. I don't really like it. I like it probably maybe more as a 4, but it does work as a 5. I just don't love the hero because it is kind of all in this way. And again, you're kind of going for this weird right-click 5. So people play it. It's a little bit cheesy. It's a little bit annoying, kind of a little bit grief in a way, but I can't deny that it works. So I'm gonna put it here in the B tier to make sure, you know, all those Nature's Prophet fans are happy, but I don't love it. I wish this hero wasn't a support. I wish they would change it. But hey, if you're good at it and you know what you're doing, you know how to gank, you know how to take advantage of it, you can absolutely stomp games with it. And then we have Grimstroke. So Grimstroke has been more popular. It was probably like, you know, D or F tier for the longest time. Ever since they changed the way that the stun works, where now you can like make it stun whenever you want, and the stun duration is a little bit better. Actually, it probably would be better overall if they kept it the way it was before, and then honestly let you just click the stun whenever. But still, it just is really good that you have a very reliable stun now, and you can be extremely effective at farming and harassing and doing all the things you want to do, and you don't really need very much farm. You just get some defensive items. You can be very effective with your ult and stuff like that. And I would say this hero is a little bit better in some matchups when you can get to your Ags later and you can have an insane illusion that you spawn. But that doesn't always work in a lot of games. Like, you know, with a Disruptor Ags, or like I said, with Avenge Ags, or these kinds of other heroes, their Ags are a little bit better because they're reliable every game, where Grimstroke not as reliable. But still, good, classic, middle-of-the-road range support that just does a little bit of everything that you want, has a silence, which is good, has a stun, which is good, has some wave clear, which is good, and has a decent teamfight ultimate. Then we have Lion. I would say I personally in pubs value Lion more than B tier. I would even put it in A tier. I'd probably switch like Pugna and Lion around. I'm just kind of putting them here based on the win rates, based on the pick rates, based on what the pros are thinking. But in like a personal pub opinion, I just like Lion more than some of these other heroes. Even though the win rate has dropped off, it has fallen off, the pick rate has fallen off. I still think, you know, those stuns are really reliable. Your laning stage is still very good. You can still, you know, mana drain the opponent and do damage. You can still fill up your mid or your carry or whoever else with mana in the middle of the lane. You never have to go back to base. You still annoy people to death with the shard. Like, there's still all these good things about Lion, even though it's like, yeah, the shard's not giga broken like it was, but it's still pretty good. Then we have techies. I think the main problem with this hero is kind of all in on magic damage, and the stun is not that reliable. You can still have an effective, you know, laning stage with the range and the right click and the harass and those kinds of things. You can still be a good 5, but it just feels a little bit awkward because of that, because of just the way your kit works. There's not a lot of, you know, it's just damage and one stun from range. And so you don't have a lot of utility in that way. You don't have a save. You don't have these other things that you would want from 5 positions usually. But, you know, you don't really need too many items. But if you do get them, you can be very effective. Then we have Witch Doctor, another one that I would put kind of with Lion in a way, because this hero is just super good in pubs. I still love this hero in pubs. Like, yes, it's been nerfed a little bit since it was like giga broken, maybe 6 months to a year ago, but it is so effective the lower you go in pubs because you can literally solo carry the game, but it still has a decently reliable stun, has a great laning stage, and then later in the game is hard to kill with like its survivability with the shard, does insane damage. So I just love the way this hero works. And honestly, your Maledict, like if you just place it on a core sometimes, they literally just have to leave the fight. Obviously, it depends on matchups. It depends on, you know, what items they have and like all that kind of stuff. But you can literally just Maledict alt or even Maledict shard cores sometimes, and they literally either die, have to go back to base, TP, whatever, or it's just that simple. And you can take out, and you know, even 2 heroes really quickly in a fight and just win the fight straight up just based on 2 spells. And that's how crazy this hero can be sometimes. Then if you're just looking for a range support that has nothing complicated about it really, like it's not that crazy dynamic, it's slow, but it's tanky, there's nothing super special about it, but it's like decent overall, just middle of the road. I need something reliable to pick that people aren't picking a ton. It's not going to get banned, it's not going to get countered. Like, this is the hero to pick. And the Ags is also really good these days, if you do get to that point, which I've seen a lot of heroes get to that point. And I've actually seen this hero more often than some of these other heroes in my pubs personally, because I think people just like it because it is reliable. Like I said, you got the stun, you got the magic damage, you got the harass, you got the potential tower push, which also the tower push is really helpful. I think that's like kind of the underrated thing in here, because there are so many glyphs and all that stuff that clear through all your creeps. Well, if you just put your liquid fire or whatever on the tower, it attacks slower, and then it doesn't clear through your creeps during the glyph as much, which is an insane buff. It just makes you like so much easier for your whole team to push. It's just way better for that. But overall, just pretty standard, pretty good middle of the road hero. Then we're getting into like more specialist heroes. This hero is obviously super specialist. Like, you better have stuns on your team. You better have like some way to secure that laning stage and the mid game and all that kind of stuff, because this hero is all about the late game, all about the team fight, like all in on that, and that's really what you're focused on. So it is a matchup thing. So picking a 5-position Phoenix can sometimes be super grief, but sometimes it can just be literally winning the game. But that's why it's kind of better to pick some of these other heroes, like even the Disruptor, in a similar way, where this hero maybe needs more items than the Phoenix, but this hero has a little bit more dynamic utility than the Phoenix. But if the Phoenix gets to that late game, you literally are just a beast in your own right. Then we have Winter Wyvern, another middle-of-the-road one that's pretty good. It's just awkward right now because it's like, as a core, it doesn't do all the things you want it to do, and then as a support, it doesn't do all the things you want to do. It's just kind of sitting in this weird middle ground where it's like, it feels like half the abilities do a lot of damage, and you want to just like, focus somebody down. It's going all in for that. But then there is like the stun aspect and some of the other things that make it a support. And so you can pick it as a support and be very effective and do a decent amount of damage from the support, position. But then, you're not buying like Witchblade as a 5 position. Like, I don't think so. Like, you better not be. But that just is, it just feels so tempting. Like, you really want to buy it, but then you have to buy all these other items. It's just a little bit awkward. There's no really super effective stun, that kind of stuff. But in the right game, it can be really effective, kind of like Phoenix in that way. Then we have Bat Rider, probably more of a 4 position, but really a good 5 position as well. People are picking it a lot in pros, and I just put it down here. I think if it might be like a specialist A tier, but just in the 5 position, it can feel awkward sometimes. And you still do want to get some items on this hero because it's not super effective without them. Like, you at least need a blink. You might want a blink and a 4 staff or something else like that, maybe a BKB later. So that's one of the main reasons it's not a great 5, but it's still effective. And it's also like specialist, like I said, in that way where it's more of a higher MMR pick. And then lastly, I would say we have Hoodwink and Mirana. These two heroes are just like pretty good right now. Hoodwink especially is very, very good. But again, they're like Bat Rider, or they're like some other heroes where they're more 4 positions. So they're very good overall as heroes, but they're just better as 4s than 5s, especially Hoodwink, because Hoodwink's all about the damage. So I think Hoodwink especially is just like way better when you're getting those items than as a 5. And then Mirana, I think, is just like middle of the road, classic, decent, good tier in both 4 and 5 position, but it just has awkward things in the 4 because you're not transitioning necessarily with items that much to a carry, and then in the 5 it's not as reliable. So it's just like middle of the road, middle of the pack either way, but you do have that team fight ability with your, the fact that your 5 is just clicking R and giving everybody invis can't be underestimated. And then we move on to C tier, and these heroes are viable but just not all that great. So we have Undying, still a monster in the lane against strength heroes especially, like can honestly 1v2 the enemy in the lane, like the carry's just farming and you're literally like killing people by yourself. That definitely still happens. And then you do have some games where your ult is really good. You can be very tanky. You can run in. You have a tombstone down. It's hard for the enemy to deal with, but he just doesn't have great matchups these days because it feels like people are able to kill this tombstone way quicker than they used to be. Like, you have like Lunas and snipers and other things in the game that just like run up and click the tombstone and just dies instantly, and it's not like they have to go out of their way that much to click it. And so that's, I think, one of the biggest things, because this hero does fall off pretty quickly, and if the tombstone's not effective, then it feels like, oh, what are we really doing? I think that's honestly one of the biggest things. And it, just overall, it doesn't feel as tanky as it once did. So that's huge. Like, you're all about being tanky and, the tombstone later. And so those two things aren't as good as they used to be. And then we have Clockwork, which Honestly, personally, I just feel like this hero is kind of D tier, or maybe even F tier, but the win rate is getting better. The pick rate is getting better. It is getting kind of some play in pro games, and so I'm going to give it its due, its justice by putting it here in C tier. I just don't love the hero. You can have good games on it, and honestly, I think one of the biggest things that I've seen from the hero is going like Orchid first item, which kind of makes this hero have pick-off potential and stuff. But that's really awkward on a 5 position to go Orchid first items. That's why I feel like, I'm putting it here because of the statistics, but I still don't feel like it's really ready for prime time. This hero still needs some major changes or buffs or something like that. I honestly would love to see the hero back in the offlane role, which it was in who knows, 5 years ago, wherever, whenever that was. It feels like so long ago that this hero was viable, let alone a core. So I would love that. I mean, this hero can still run people down and stuff like that in the lane and can have some effective games. And the rocket is still going to somehow make you do the most damage on the team for some reason. And you're still going to have that, BKB piercing stun that's still sometimes hard to hit. So there are things that make the hero good, but overall with not getting farm and not being able to farm pretty much at all, it's really hard. You push waves, but not farm. You can push them from a distance, but you don't actually get the last hits. You just kind of damage the creeps. Because of that, that's why it almost has to play 5, but then you need items for the hero to be effective. And so that's why it's a little bit awkward in this position. Then we have Warlock. I will say, I put Warlock a little bit higher in the previous tier because I do think this hero is pretty effective, and I was kind of doing more pub tier lists, or trying to do that in a little bit of a way where I was just kind of saying, okay, because this hero's better at lower MMRs, I'm going to put him a little higher, where I'm back to doing it just, based on the pro statistics and stuff like that. And so this hero really is a quintessential, the lower MMR you go, the better it is. And I still think even at 6K, 5K below that, it is really good even then. You are sacrificing some of that early game potential or mid game potential because you don't have a great stun. The lane is still very good right now. I think that really helps the hero. So it's really good in the lane, and then from 10 minutes to 25 minutes or so, it just feels a little bit awkward and bad. You just have this one stun on your ult that's super low cooldown. But then once you get to the 30+ minute range, if you get an Ags or if you get a refresher or whatever you want to get, just a couple items, you can feel kind of insane on this hero and honestly win games 1v5. And so because of that, and because games are going super late these days, this hero still is very effective. And I would personally, and just in pubs in general, rate him a little bit higher, maybe B tier, maybe even A tier if I was kind of going crazy. But still, overall, I mean, the win rate isn't as good. It's been nerfed a bunch, and it's just the numbers aren't as good overall. I still think it does a lot of those same things, but the numbers aren't there with the hero. And then AA has really just fallen off since the heart meta, went away. Sure, there are heroes like Centaur and some of these other guys that are super tanky boys that are running around from the off lane, but that's really not what it's all about anymore. People are buying Shivas now. They're going for that item first. That's a tanky item, but that's a tanky against right-click item. That's more of a tanky offensive vision item. And so this hero's not as valuable when you don't have those Necros and those big tanky guys that you're just going to melt with your ult. And that's kind of the focus of the hero. It really feels like, yes, it's still good against Slark, but it's also hard to hit your ult against Slark. But if you don't have those really good heroes in the meta that AA counters, then AA is not going to be good. I really think AA is all about that. It's all about it's all about matchups. Does this hero go well against the heroes that are super popular? And that's really just it. That's straightforward. Then we have Lich. Personally, this is almost like another Warlock in a sense, except Warlock was really good and Lich has been bad for a long time. But I personally like Lich. I think he's a pretty classic, decent support, middle of the road. I value him higher personally, especially at lower MMR pubs, because of just the things that he does with there's a mini save, tankiness, you have a stun, you have a wave clear. I think your ultimate is really good, kind of like a Witch Doctor in a way. Yes, you're not as good as Witch Doctor is in terms of just doing raw damage and just deleting people, making them go back to base. But if you're smart, if you can get in their good, right position, you can just own games with this ultimate. It just is a little bit harder than maybe some of these other heroes. But I do value him kind of more than C tier personally, but the statistics say he's here. And I'm okay with him being here, but I would look for him to be on the rise because I hope he gets buffs in the future. Then Snapfire I'm putting here because this hero, you can just get that Solar Crest. You don't really need too many items. Your ult is still effective. You can wave clear and get a ton of items because you just have a great, You have 2 great wave clear spells. It's just honestly one of my favorite supports to play because of the fact that you just do reliably get your farm. And I mean, you can get pretty aggressive in the lane. You can, if you know what you're doing, you can be an effective kind of lane dominator in a way, but you can have matchups where it's pretty bad. So just, be aware of that. And then obviously if there ever is like an Undying on the team or some other hero that you need to, like a Pugna or something like that, or even Zeus, which is really popular right now, you can kill those, the Tombstone and the Ward and the Zeus Nimbus really quickly with this hero, which is really great. Then we have Abaddon. This hero is just good for its save. It's more of like an off lane, I feel like these days. People are playing it more aggressively, and I kind of like that. I wish this hero was more of a core. I hate picking this hero as just this kind of, I'm going to save you and be tanky and do heals and stuff like that. But it is decent, okay, I guess. I think the laning stage is pretty bad on the hero early on because like you don't really do too much, but if you have a passive lane already that you think you're just going to get farm, you can go for this hero. You can be effective then to just like sustain in the lane. And then once you transition to the later portion of the game, you can be an effective save, and that can be very good, but it's not great in a lot of games. But honestly, I would put it lower than C tier if it was like 100% up to me, but people are picking it. People are having some success with it. So that's kind of just where I'm putting it here. Then Elder Titan, not really super popular right now, but it's just okay, especially in some matchups. The pros are using it sometimes and having some effectiveness. Then other times it just feels like it does absolutely nothing. Then we have Marcy. This hero is good right now, I think, more as a carry. Like, people are just going for the carry version of Marcy, and you can kind of still do that, but from the 5 position, it just feels awkward, which is why it's in C tier. It's like a good hero overall, kind of like in a way I would say Hoodwink is or whatever, but because the 5 position is probably its worst role, maybe other than like a mid or something like that, that's why I'm putting it down here. But you can still have effectiveness. Like if you're picking this Marcy 5 and some of the pros are doing it too, you can still like pop an ult and run in and just kill people. So it's definitely viable in some senses, but you might have trouble in some matchups. And that's the same thing with Dawnbreaker. This hero can be effective at times, just not great. It's not like the best hero right now, kind of middle of the road. It just has an awkward position to be in because it's not a support or a carry. Like, it kind of was in the same position as Marcy in some ways and still is, where it's like, what role does this hero really play? Like last time when it was effective, it was more of an off lane, but that feels a little bit weird because it's like, do you do damage? Are you saving people with an ult? Are you kind of mobility clearing stuff and being on the other side of the map? Are you a support? Like, it's just very weird right now. So I think they need to kind of either change the hero a little bit, give it some buffs, see where it's at. But I don't love the heroes that play like every role but don't play any specific role super effectively. So I'd like it if they did something about that, made it more like just focus on one thing. But you can pick it as a 5 and have some success. Then lastly, for like viable heroes at all, heroes that are 5s but just not great, we have Ogre. I would say this is kind of like a Warlock or a Lich. Like, the lower MMR you go, the more success you can have with Ogre, but like, honestly, it's weird because you want to go Midas every game. Don't get me wrong, I know you do, and that's a little bit grief, but still, I mean, if you can get it and you can get some items, you can honestly be really effective with the hero. But it is kind of just like, okay, I stun, I do some damage over time, and hopefully I can buff up some people with attack speed, which is great. But that just feels a little bit bad, especially because you have to walk like really close to the enemy to get your stun off, and that's not always going to happen these days. And so because of that, you almost just become late game, you just become an attack speed buff, which is really not worth it, especially when we have like Solar Crest and other things that you can just buy an item. You could have like any one of these other heroes and just get a Solar Crest, and it's like, obviously it's not as good as Ogre Magi, but it's still like kind of almost equivalent in a way if that's all he's doing. Then we have Tusk, a little bit awkward as a 5. You could still pick it maybe if it was in the right matchup, but just kind of awkward, like I said, because melee 5s can be awkward. It just really is what it is. Like, unless you're a Tree or a Undying or some hero that really goes in and just beats the crap out of people, which you can do sometimes, and that's why Tusk is here and like still semi-viable, but he's just not nearly as good. Like, if Undying's not going to be as good as a 5, like, Tusk isn't going to be great. Then Omni I just put here almost because I wanted to talk about Omni support in general. Omni is just more of a core. I mean, I think back in the day, Omni was mostly a 5, and that's kind of just what he did. It was almost like Silencer in a way, which I can talk about him now as well, where it's really just all about clicking R and having that team fight. Like Silencer silencing everybody in the enemy team, Omni Knight just making everyone in that AoE on your team in the team fight invincible to physical damage. That's really what it was all about. And this hero can still be a support now because the way that it just gives you that immunity to a carry and it gives, you know, that BKB to a carry. So you can kind of still do that. But because it's all focused on, like, you know, its new ability is like kind of right click, like pure damage, and you have that little heal that's kind of, you need to go in. Because it has that, it feels really, really awkward to pick this hero just for clicking a couple buttons to like give people a little bit of buffs that, I mean, they can be good, but just you have two kind of useless spells, it feels like, or spells that you can use, but you have to be super close range and you're the 5. And so because of that, it's just not really being picked as a 5 very much, and this could just like fall off as being a support in general at all. And so that's Omni Knight. Theoretically, like I said, you could still pick it as a support, but not really. It's not really happening too much. This Keep It to the Light is viable because Medusa has become a better hero. That's really it, honestly. Otherwise, you don't really want to pick this hero as a 5 because no stun, like, yeah, there's a slow, but it's all about doing magic damage and getting items like that. And so that feels awkward. But if you're laning with a Medusa, that's a carry. That's insane. Great laning stage. And then that scales way into the late game. And you're probably going to have a Slardar or some other hero on your team that stuns anyway, so you don't have to worry about it. Then Dazzle can still be played as a 5, like it fell off a lot as a core recently, but it can still be played as a 5 because you have the save, you have the heals, you can like chase people down in lane and stuff like that. All the things Dazzle's done for a little while, it's just not very good. Like before it became a core, it was kind of trash in general, even if it's semi like, okay, it's still a core. Like, yeah, you can pick it as a 5. It is realistic, I guess, but it's just not very good. And so that's kind of where it's at still. Then we have Spirit Breaker, another one that's like along the lines of Tusk, where it's like you can get away with it if you know, if it's the right game, and then it can feel pretty good later in the game, but sometimes you can just have a terrible laning stage, do absolutely nothing, grief your carry, and that feels bad. And then Silencer, along the lines of, like I said, with the Omni Knight ult or whatever, this hero is just all about pressing R, and that just feels awkward. Like, it feels like Warlock in that way later, where it's like, Warlock is all about pressing R, and obviously you can link people and stuff like that, or that's how Warlock used to feel. But now Warlock has more dynamic ability to slow people and to be annoying in some way, do extra damage. Silencer doesn't really do that. I mean, you just press R and then, yeah, you can get off a couple spells, but are you really going to right-click people as 5 Silencer? No. And so that's, I think, the biggest thing with this hero is I hope they change something in the future to make this hero either like way more of a core with the like focus on that right-click, or just take away the right-click thing altogether and just give him something else to do, because it just feels awkward. This hero has not been like popular or good forever, it feels like. And then lastly, we have F tier. These heroes are just not 5s. Bounty, just either a 4 or off lane pretty much, not a 5. Like, this is like Giga Grief. If, you know, if Spear Breaker or a Tusk are hard to play, this guy's like impossible. Do not play as a 5. Gyro, I would even say, is not a 5. Like, I would not pick this hero as a 5, but you can pick it as a 5. Actually, in fact, I'm going to edit this. I would put him over here, actually. Just because I think I've seen it work. It can work. It just feels kind of bad sometimes when you have no reliable stun. Your ult is a little bit weird. I just rather you get items on this hero, but I do think it is viable. So I'm just going to put it out of the F tier there, but I would not pick it over like a billion other things that you could pick that have like magic damage and stuff like that in teamfight ultimates. Like, why would you pick the Gyro in that position? Then we have Clinks. This hero is just all about right-click damage or being like a right-click carry from the 5. It's not, the map is not that big, guys. There's not that much on the map, so just relax. Don't pick Clinks as a 5. Enigma was a support for a long time. I almost could like take this hero off this list, but it's not a support right now. Wind Ranger, I mean, yeah, that's not happening. Like, again, like, what are you really doing? Like, you're just going to use your Shard, I guess. Like, another hero that is this universal hero that can play like right-click carry from the 4 maybe, or something like that. It can play off-lane mid, but not a 5. Zeus, not a 5. Like, people will try to get away with it, but you're not fooling anybody. You're just trying to play mid, and you're a 5, and you're going to grief. And then same thing with Pudge. I will never, ever, ever allow you to tell me that Pudge is a good 5. Don't ever tell me that in my pub. Don't ever tell me that ever. Do not tell me that in the comments. Never say in the comment that Pudge is a 5. Don't say it right now. So that is my tier list for position 5 for patch 7.35D. As always, guys, if you like the video, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.